Stop for a moment and look directly at the pattern running through your life before you pretend this message belongs to someone else. You keep stepping in to rescue people who repeatedly choose the same destructive decisions. Each time you do it, you quietly announce something about your position. You place yourself beneath the consequences that were meant for them. You absorb the damage that was designed to correct their behavior. On the surface, it feels honorable. It feels compassionate. But in reality, it slowly dismantles your authority. Trying to save someone who is drowning appears heroic until you realize that survival instinct makes people climb anything nearby. They will climb your shoulders, your back, even your throat if it means they get one more breath. And when they do, you both go under. Pulling someone out of a deep hole looks admirable until the person inside uses you as a ladder. In desperation, they grab you, push you down, and step on your body to escape. In the real world, this is exactly how misplaced help functions. You have already seen this dynamic countless times. The colleague who ignores clear instructions, delays responsibility, then panics when the deadline arrives. They reach for you because they know you will fix what they refuse to handle. The partner who repeats the same damaging behavior, apologizes with convincing words and then quietly repeats it again because they expect you to carry the emotional debris. The friend who continues sabotaging their own life but calls it unfortunate luck every time the consequences appear. These situations are not misunderstandings, they are selections. The mistake was chosen, the result was predictable. The moment you intervene, you broadcast a dangerous message about your role in the system. You exist to soften consequences. You exist to protect them from reality. That message instantly lowers your position. You become the buffer instead of the authority. Not every mistake requires distance, but repetition reveals intention. Most people learn after one painful outcome. When the same error occurs again and again, it signals something else. It signals that the cost of failure is being paid by someone else, and that someone has been you. Pain creates memory. Advice rarely does. Psychology has already settled this principle with ruthless clarity. Behavior changes only when the consequences are experienced directly. Until that happens, nothing shifts. Words dissolve quickly. Experience engraves lessons into the mind. That is why the people you keep rescuing never change. Your explanations fade while your protection remains. You tell yourself that you are helping. In truth, you are absorbing consequences that were meant to reshape their decisions. You finish assignments for co-workers who never improve. You stabilize emotional chaos for partners who refuse discipline. You carry the burden for friends who repeatedly avoid responsibility. Every intervention teaches them something silent but powerful. Your suffering costs less than their growth. Niccolo Machiavelli warned about this reality without sentiment. People change only when necessity forces them. When necessity disappears, discipline disappears with it. By removing the consequences, you remove the only pressure capable of altering behavior. The person no longer needs foresight or restraint. They only need you. What you call kindness slowly becomes submission. It trains others to fail safely because someone else will absorb the damage. That someone has been you. This is the uncomfortable truth. Saving people repeatedly does not elevate you. It exposes you as controllable. It places you beneath those who feel comfortable making reckless decisions because they trust you will intercept the impact. You might call this compassion, but reality recognizes it as misplaced hierarchy. This conversation is meant to dismantle the instinct to rescue and replace it with something colder but far more effective. It replaces emotional reaction with structure. It replaces interference with restraint. It restores distance between you and consequences that were never yours to carry. Once you understand this shift, you begin to see the pattern everywhere. The person who constantly borrows money but never changes their spending. The employee who ignores feedback yet expects you to clean up the damage. The friend who repeats destructive habits but describes the outcome as unfortunate timing. None of them are unlucky. They are insulated. Every time you step forward, you quietly announce that their choices have no real weight. Your time, energy, and attention exist to shield them from the natural results of their own actions. That is not loyalty. It is surrender disguised as support. Machiavelli understood that systems collapse when consequences are transferred away from the person responsible. Structure depends on cost. When cost disappears, behavior deteriorates. The same law governs individuals. This is why repeated patterns never stop. They are comfortable. Comfort grows wherever consequences are delayed. By intervening, you extend that comfort. You train people to lean on you rather than standing on their own decisions. Eventually, the weight begins to irritate you. You feel drained. Quiet resentment builds beneath the surface. Not because they failed, but because you carried something that was never yours. Here's the rule that ends the cycle. If someone chooses a path after warnings and clear understanding, the outcome belongs to them. The moment you claim that outcome, you lose leverage. You lose respect. You lose position. This is not cruelty. It is structure. Once you grasp this truth, the pattern becomes obvious. You stop wondering why people drain your energy. The answer has always been simple. You made their consequences negotiable. The moment you stop rescuing people from the consequences they knowingly created, pressure does not disappear. It shifts. The weight that once rested quietly on your shoulders suddenly drops back onto the person who created it. Systems that relied on your intervention begin to destabilize, and everyone involved instinctively looks toward the pillar that used to hold everything together. That pillar has always been you. This is the phase where most people collapse back into their old role. The individual who depended on your protection rarely responds with reflection at first. Instead, they intensify the urgency. They frame the situation as an emergency. They exaggerate the damage. They suggest that your silence means abandonment. Their instinct is not growth. Their instinct is restoration. They want the old structure back where your intervention absorbs the cost. What you are witnessing in that moment is exposure. You removed the insulation that once protected them from reality. The discomfort they feel is not cruelty from you. It is the weight of consequences returning to the person who produced them. And because that weight feels unfamiliar, they search quickly for the easiest way to relieve it. Your reaction. This is the critical trap. If you step in now, you confirm the pattern. You teach them that persistence eventually breaks your restraint. If you begin explaining your decision, you return authority to them because they have successfully forced you into justification. The moment you start defending your distance, you hand them the exact instruction manual needed to pull you back into the system next time. This is why silence becomes most powerful after the pattern breaks. Machiavelli understood this mechanism with brutal clarity. People do not test limits when limits are loudly declared. They test them when restraint appears. The individual who moves first reveals weakness. Whoever rushes to stabilize the system becomes the one who must carry it. Stillness forces correction. When you remain motionless, the system must reorganize itself without relying on you. When you react, you restore the old hierarchy where they choose and you absorb. That hierarchy will repeat endlessly because it rewards irresponsibility and punishes discipline. Pay attention to what happens inside you during this stage. Discomfort appears immediately. A quiet guilt surfaces in your chest. You feel the urge to intervene, to repair the damage, to calm the situation before it spreads further. Your mind tries to justify movement by calling it compassion. But that urge is not compassion, it is conditioning. For a long time, you trained yourself to associate movement with responsibility. Doing something felt safe, doing nothing felt dangerous. Silence felt like abandonment. Intervention felt like virtue. Over time, your identity became tied to solving problems that were not yours. Restraint threatens that identity. That is why it feels unnatural at first. Not because it is wrong, but because it disrupts a role you occupied for too long. You were the stabilizer, the fixer, the one who absorbed consequences so others did not have to feel them. Now that role is disappearing. Once consequences land without your protection, two outcomes appear. The person adapts or the pattern collapses. Both outcomes restore order. Neither outcome requires your sacrifice. Adaptation means they finally confront reality. The cost of their decisions becomes visible. They adjust their behavior because experience teaches what advice never could. Collapse means the relationship, habit, or dynamic dissolves because it depended entirely on your intervention. Both scenarios return the system to balance. This is where authority quietly returns to you. Not through confrontation, not through explanation, but through the absence of rescue. The moment people realize you will no longer intercept the consequences of their decisions, they must negotiate with reality instead of negotiating with you. That shift elevates your position automatically. You are no longer the resource people drain to escape responsibility. You become a boundary that cannot be bypassed. Boundaries reorganize behavior without argument. They do not require speeches or emotional persuasion. They function simply because crossing them carries cost. And this is where the deeper truth begins to reveal itself. Many interventions you made were not actually about helping the other person. They were about protecting how you were perceived. Being dependable felt safer than being respected. Being needed felt safer than being distant. When you intervened quickly, you avoided the uncomfortable silence where someone might judge you as cold. Your image demanded action. You wanted to be seen as reliable, supportive, indispensable. But that desire created a weakness. The moment others recognize that your identity depends on stepping in, they stop managing themselves and begin managing you. They adjust their apologies, they rehearse remorse, they promise change long enough to trigger your rescue again. Nothing changes because nothing has to. This is why repeated apologies feel hollow. This is why promises sound sincere but expire quickly. Behavior resets the moment stability returns because stability was never earned. It was provided by you. Machiavelli warned leaders about mercy without consequence for this exact reason. Mercy detached from cost dissolves discipline. When discipline disappears, authority becomes decorative. It still exists on the surface, but it no longer shapes behavior. People stop responding to structure and start searching for loopholes. Look closely at the pattern you tolerated. The apology appears after damage occurs. The promise appears once consequences arrive. The same behavior returns once the system stabilizes again. That sequence is not emotional confusion. It is learned negotiation. You became the negotiable element, the person who could be persuaded, softened, convinced. Once someone learns that outcomes can be modified through you, they stop fearing the decision itself. The action loses weight because the consequences can be redirected. Words lose meaning when consequences disappear. Warnings become background noise. Boundaries become suggestions. Respect fades because nothing enforces the line. The rule is simple and absolute. Respect forms only when crossing a boundary carries real cost. The moment cost disappears, the reason for self-control disappears as well. Powerful individuals understand this principle intuitively. They do not offer unlimited access. They help carefully. They intervene deliberately. And they refuse to rescue those who knowingly create their own collapse. Experience leaves marks where explanations evaporate. Once you internalize that reality, your behavior changes naturally. You no longer confuse compassion with interference, and you no longer mistake being needed for being in control. Ask yourself something honestly, without disguising the answer behind good intentions. Who are you constantly rescuing? Who do you repeatedly protect from their own choices? Who receives your time, your emotional labor, your money, your attention every time the same problem appears again? Look closely at the pattern because it reveals more than their behavior. It reveals the role you have been playing. There is always an exchange hidden inside repeated rescue. Sometimes it is control. Sometimes it is relevance. Sometimes it is the quiet comfort of being needed. Sometimes it is simply easier to focus on their chaos than to confront the silence of your own boundaries. But understand this with brutal clarity. Every time you intervene, you postpone the lesson that reality is trying to deliver. When you soften the landing, you weaken the impact. When you absorb consequences that do not belong to you, you train dependence. Dependence erodes respect faster than conflict ever could. Machiavelli understood that leaders who constantly absorb disorder eventually collapse beneath it. Systems rot when consequences are suspended. The same rule governs individuals. A person who never feels the weight of their decisions never develops judgment. A person who is rescued repeatedly never learns restraint. A person protected from reality never grows strength. Over time, something darker begins to form beneath the surface. The people you protect begin to resent you. They may not say it openly, but the resentment exists. You become a reminder that their stability was not earned. Your presence exposes the truth that without your intervention, they would have fallen long ago. Instead of gratitude, they feel discomfort. That discomfort pushes them to test your limits. They begin asking for more help, more understanding, more patience. The boundaries move gradually until you are exhausted. This is the hidden cost of playing the savior. You do not create loyalty, you create entitlement. The law is simple and unforgiving. Do not intervene in mistakes people chose with full awareness. Do not interrupt consequences meant to teach. Do not take reality's role and expect peace in return. Step back. Allow the outcome to arrive. Experience teaches with a clarity that advice never achieves. When the consequence lands directly on the person who created it, something changes. They either develop discipline or the pattern collapses entirely. Both outcomes restore balance. This is not cruelty. It is structure. Structure is what separates authority from exhaustion. Once you stop rescuing, the system reorganizes itself. Some people rise to meet the pressure. Others disappear because they depended entirely on your protection. Both results are correct. And something else begins to happen the moment you remove yourself from the cycle. Silence creates pressure. Absence creates friction. That friction forces truth to reveal itself. People who depended on your rescue suddenly feel exposed. Some will panic. Some will accuse you of changing. They may claim you have become distant, selfish, or cold. Those accusations are not reflections of your character. They are reflections of the protection you removed. They were not attached to you. They were attached to the shelter you provided. Machiavelli understood this better than most people ever will. Dependence often disguises itself as loyalty. As long as the safety net remains, people appear grateful. The moment it disappears, their true intentions surface. Pressure reveals reality. When you stop absorbing consequences, something unexpected happens. Your presence gains weight. Your words become rare. Your attention stops being automatic. Scarcity begins to form around you. Scarcity is not cruelty. Scarcity is structure. When access is no longer guaranteed, people behave differently. They begin to calculate their actions instead of leaning on you. They think before making decisions because they understand the cost will be real. Authority emerges without force. You do not lecture them. You do not threaten them. You simply allow reality to do its work. Reality is far more persuasive than any speech you could deliver. Many people will never thank you for this transformation. Growth rarely feels pleasant while it is happening. It feels like loss before it feels like strength. The individuals who survive that pressure will respect you permanently because they know your boundaries are real. The ones who cannot survive it were never meant to remain close. This is the quiet separation that restructures your life. Rescuers remain entangled forever. They spend years managing the consequences of other people's decisions. Their energy drains slowly while the same problems repeat. Leaders operate differently. They step back and allow correction to occur naturally. Once you understand this law, your life simplifies. You stop being dragged into chaos that never belonged to you. You stop being needed for the wrong reasons. You stop carrying burdens that were never assigned to you in the first place. Your presence becomes something others must stand on their own around. This is the cleanest form of power that exists. Not domination, not intimidation. Simply becoming irrelevant to other people's chaos. Your energy stops leaking because you are no longer intercepting consequences that belong elsewhere. You do not need to control anyone. You only need to stop carrying what was never yours. Once this principle settles into your thinking, something irreversible happens. You stop arguing with reality. You stop trying to rescue individuals determined to repeat the same behavior. You stop confusing compassion with obligation. Some lessons require loss. Some growth requires consequence. Interfering with those forces prevents the only experience strong enough to reshape a person. Machiavelli never believed giving away power was noble. He believed misplaced power was dangerous. When you remove consequences, you train people to rely on you while quietly resenting you at the same time. This is why rescuers are rarely respected. They are drained, blamed, and eventually discarded once their usefulness fades. The man who allows consequence to stand is different. He is not cruel. He is clear. He understands that boundaries are not walls. They are filters. Only those capable of standing on their own remain close. Everyone else drifts away when the safety net disappears. If these ideas created discomfort inside you, that discomfort is valuable. It signals a boundary that needs rebuilding. If this message clarified something you have sensed for years but could never name, then you are already standing at the edge of a different way of living. From this moment forward, the rule becomes simple. You do not absorb other people's consequences. You allow reality to complete its work. When you follow that rule consistently, something powerful begins to unfold. Your energy stabilizes, your attention stops scattering. The people around you either develop strength or remove themselves. Either outcome restores order. And for the first time in a long time, you are no longer exhausted by choices that were never yours.